Oh. Welcome, everybody. This is a very exciting start to our Southern California Learning Community Series. This is our fourth year, and we have learned so much developing this program with the support of Strategies 2.0, and we're excited to kick off this new series that we developed for you today based on what we learned from last year. So how many people in the room in Los Angeles with me right here have been in a learning community before? All right, we got some repeaters. All right. Is there any way for me to know how many people in the other counties have participated before? Can we get a sense or a shout out from that? Okay. Yeah, right. Thank you, everybody, for participating in that little question. So what I'd like to do is just give a quick overview before we introduce our guest speaker. And as you know, we're here in Southern California. This is the Strategies 2.0 Southern California Learning Community Series. And I don't seem to be having any success here to go here. I'm going to do that. That was working before. Well, I will figure that out in a little bit. It was working before. Okay, all right. So thanks for fixing that. So what I wanted to have an opportunity, I have slides that were working before that were going to show us who is from which counties participating in this event. And I think, Natalie, if we go in here, we'll see it. Yeah. And so, for example, we know we have San Diego State is a hub for this event. And can we get a shout out from the San Diego State? Is it possible to have them introduce themselves?
Sure. Hello, can you hear us?
Okay.
Oh. Hi, can you hear us?
Yes.
Oh, great. All right, we're happy to be here. We have individuals from SDSU Social Policy Institute at Strategies 2.0, as well as YMCA, and a student from San Diego State University.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I do know that we also have representation from San Luis Obispo County. Can we hear from them? I don't know when either. Oh, rats. Okay, thanks. Thank you. I don't know where it went. Okay, so we can also have from Riverside County. Can we hear from you? Okay, here we go. Okay, San Luis Obispo County, are you ready to introduce yourself?
Hi.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8, including myself, and we're all very happy to be here. We might have a couple coming in late because there's a lot of traffic on the 101 both ways. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next we have Ventura County, maybe? Are they ready to say hello?
Can you hear us?
I don't know.
Hi.
All right.
Hi, Lisa. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Kathleen, give a big shout out to the group, please.
Hello, Ventura in the house. Hi. We have about 10 participants currently and a few more arriving.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And what about San Bernardino County?
San Bernardino County Children's Network.
Thank you. We can hear you. Anything you want to share with the group?
No. Excited to be here.
All right. Thank you. And I think finally did we hear from Riverside? Not yet. So we'll hear from Riverside in a moment. So we'll just go ahead and wait just a moment. Yeah, you have to get that. There we go. Are they good? Are they? Okay. All right. So, oh my gosh, we got a slide up. All right. This is very exciting. We know Efren's is up, and we're very excited to hear from Efren. But what I want to do is take this opportunity to, there we go. Thank you. Just click right here to this slide. Okay, here I am. Lydia Marquez is right here. She is a trainer consultant for strategies. And Natalie Rhodes, thank you, Natalie, for your technical support and logistical support. And also, our purpose here today is, our theme is revisioning prevention, exploring all of our systems of innovation and best practice in the prevention of child abuse and neglect. And this is what the learning community is designed to do, for us to be exchanging what our thoughts are, what we're learning, what we've thought before, what we changed about our beliefs. But before we do that, I wanted to give Jolie Mason for her to come in and just introduce herself to you, because she's the one that made it possible for us to be here at Richstone Family Resource Center. So if you could come up, Jolie, and we really... And for those of you that are in the other counties, this is the very first time that Richstone Family Resource Center has made it possible for us to be in their facility. It is a brand new family resource center, and I wish you could see it. It is just incredible, the accomplishment of the community that rallied around the need here and made it possible to create this beautiful facility. And I'm going to let Jolie share it a little bit more.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, I see the camera. Good morning. Thank you for coming this morning. Richstone Family Center has been around since 1974, and the focus is on child abuse prevention and prevention of violence in communities and in schools. We provide a variety of services that include therapy for individuals, families, children. We provide family support type services. We have a First 5 home visitation program. We have an after school program. We also, this center that the Los Angeles folks are in right now is our new wellness center. So we're going to be doing a variety of different wellness programs, including Zumba, Tai Chi, nutrition, art therapy, a ton of different things that I can't think of all of them right now, but please visit our website at richstonefamily.org for more information. And thank you all for coming, and we're really excited about our new space. We're still under renovations, but hopefully within the next few months, we'll be completed. Thank you.
Okay. And so this is an example of our learning community. We got to meet Jolie way back when, and we've remained connected throughout the process of this learning community. And she was the link to offering this facility today. And I would really encourage you to visit their website, because I reviewed it. And it's not just a beautiful website, but it's also rich with information about their accomplishments and how they tell a great story about how they grew this family resource center in this community. So take advantage of it. Okay, so we did our participants. We already know who's in the room. We already know who is in the different areas. And as you can see, we also have online participants, so which we're not going to call them out. And I anticipate, I think there were 30 enrolled. I don't know, and I'm here seeing Lydia's telling me that there is about 30 folks who are sitting at their offices right now, watching us, engaging with us. And I welcome all of you who are online with us. And we hope to make this a very meaningful experience for you through this technology. So before we get to our exciting guest specialist speaker, I want to thank Office of Child Abuse Prevention, because they have made it possible for us to come out and develop not just workshops, trainings, having counseling support services as needed for your organizations, but this learning community is a new, well, we're 4 years into it. It's not so new, but it was a new idea back then, and we're really excited that we get to continue to do this peer exchange where we're sitting here talking with each other, learning from each other, and learning how we validate what we do is good work, but also improve upon it. So just to do our strategies mission, I want you to know that the Strategies 2.0 serves as a catalyst for professional skills, organizational structure, and community relationships necessary to mitigate the risk factors for child abuse and neglect, and to promote child, family, and community well-being. So we are together on this. We are partnering with you, regardless of whether you're in Los Angeles County, whether you're in San Luis Obispo County, where I'm from. I'm doing the same work. And I am so eager to learn, and so eager, and still at this age, to know how to be better at providing not just services for families, but working with the sector of folks that I work with, and how we improve our knowledge, increase our knowledge, and improve our skills. So learning communities, again, we want to have the partnerships. We want to grow our capacity to solve pressing problems. This Family Resource Center, the Richstone Family Resource Center, is an example and a testimony to that. People coming together and creating that kind of a resource to those who live in this area of Los Angeles. And this is where we get to go to meet our guest speaker, Efren Aguilar. And Efren is someone who came to us through his, presentation at Riverside County. And Lydia, who works with us here, highly recommended him being part of our learning community today. And so, Efren, thank you for getting on the phone with us, talking through our vision for this. We really appreciate your enthusiasm for the work that we all do, and we're so thrilled to meet you in person. And
I have a mic.
oh, that's right, you have a mic.
And I
We
need that. Yeah. And I think I'll stand on
Okay.
this
And-
side so I don't get blinded by
Yeah.
the projector. And I hope that the folks on the internet can see me. I hope. Okay, and is my mic still working? Okay, good. We're good to go. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm actually quite fortunate. The things that I'm going to be sharing with you today, just want to be clear, we're going to talk about some very provocative things today. I want you to know that it's with complete humility that I'm presenting them to you. I am not an expert by any stretch. I don't think that there are any experts that really would be useful in informing your work. I think the expertise lies within you folks. And so by us being able to share this information with you, it'll help us take this work into a more positive direction. So before we begin, just a thought exercise. Imagine a society with a fair and level playing field. Imagine systems of care that are perfectly designed to optimize the development for everyone. And consider that while we're not there yet, we're closer today than we were yesterday. And we'll be closer even to that at the end of the discussion than we are now. And there's something actually ominous about the first question here. It's because I think that our systems are already presuming that there's a fair level playing field. And in the way we articulate our data, the data that we use, I don't think that they recognize some of the incredible challenges that are happening at the community level. And if our systems are actually blind to these problems, like they seem to be operating blind to these problems, I think that we're not going to really get to the root of how to actually address them. So I want to give a special thanks to all of my colleagues that I've been working with some of these folks for 20 years now. I'm not a young person. I've been working in the field professionally since 1988. So that's a long time. Those older colleagues of mine, they're not referenced on this list. This is just the folks that have been working with me over the last 10 years. So obviously the UCLA Center for Healthier Children, Families, and Communities, the Transforming Early Childhood Community Systems Initiative, Lisa Stanley, Josh Bader, Emily Chan, Jaquel Gardner, Katie Barr, Neil Halfon are seminal and very important. In fact, a lot of the information here is Josh Bader provided the maps, a lot of that spatial analytics that provide the content for this. Lisa, obviously, leadership on the project. Katie and Jaquel are new, but Emily's been working very diligently and respectfully with communities to capture a lot of these important data sets. And a lot of the slides I'm using are from Neil Halfon. Jaquel and Katie are actually new to the team, and I know that their contributions are going to be just as impressive. The Doris Duke Population Change Learning Community, Pat Bowie, Sara is on the group, Elena Fiallo, Liz Welch, Ron Brown, Lola and Ramelli are our funders, and there are a number of community folks who have been helping us understand what's happening and how to analyze these data. Too many to name, but I just wanted to recognize them. Also the ACT California team, my colleagues Lila, Jennifer Lopez is in the room with me. Thank you, Jennifer. But Charlene Choi, Aaron Block, Emily Cornell, and then all of our partners at Public Health Advocates, Harold Goldstein, Flo Kofer, Katie, Reggie, Mike, Lourdes, Belinda, Kania. All of these folks are working hard on this new venture that we'll be mentioning at the end. The cities of South Pasadena, South El Monte, and South LA, not a city, a community, need to recognize them because we will be looking at some of their community data. And then all the brilliant folks that contribute to this body of work over decades and decades. I'm culturally and ethnically, I have to recognize that I'm not the first person doing this. There's been people doing it much longer than me for a much longer period of time over multiple generations, and I just need to recognize that. All of that out of the way, I had to say it because it's important, and sometimes we don't get a chance to do that. The review of today's outline will be an epidemiological review of adversity. I know it's a kind of a nerdy, wonky term, but I'll articulate what that means. We will be talking about lessons learned and emerging findings, reviewing EDI as a population measure of child well-being and child well-becoming, how to use population measures as systems level diagnostic tools. With it, we can map spatial inequity, we can graph racial inequity. We'll be going over that as well. And I will discuss All Children Thrive California. It's taking a glimpse past the horizon and discussing how we can, what we review today can be used to inspire transformational change in the way that you do your business. So I know it's a lot. I know that the folks on the internet are probably thinking like, oh my gosh, how is he gonna do it in 30 minutes? And we'll do it in 30 minutes. Other special acknowledgements, bringing the science, all of these names that you see here, these are folks that have contributed in the literature, very important to recognize them. But I do want to make it known that there are other sociologists in the world who are artists who covered this with nuance and in a way that really articulates what the hell is happening much better than any journal article that I have read. Special shout out to Stevie Wonder, Living for the City, because that song itself is place-based, it's life course, talks about the degradation of our ecology, as well as the ultimate effects of this kind of structural violence on an individual. You have to listen to the whole thing. Don't listen to the radio where it cuts it right before it gets heavy. Those on the radio, look for it. Please, Grandmaster Flash, Furious 5, Ice-T, obviously important. Now, one more thing. These data and information are presented, again, with humility, like I said. Before we begin, I want you to activate some neuroplasticity. So I'm going to be sharing with you concepts that might be new to you. It's okay, we'll get through it when we discuss it later. But I really want you to orient yourself to 3 conceptual pillars. I want you to all begin to think spatially. It's going to allow us to think cross-sector. It's going to allow us to think in ways where we actually look for new partnerships to get the work done. I want you to act locally because that's the only way you can actually start measuring what you're doing. And we need to learn collectively. And since you guys are already a learning network, you guys are already doing that, I'm sure. Now here's the nerdy stuff. So sorry for the folks on the internet, but we'll get through it. Part 1, the epidemiological review of adversity. I always want to start with a quote, an orienting thought. Anybody who's read Savage Inequality, raise your hand. Everybody should read that book, right? Do you agree? Everybody needs to read that book. So long as these kinds of inequalities persist, all of us who are given expensive educations have to live with the knowledge that our victories are contaminated because the game has been rigged to our advantage. That is so important to recognize. These are the traditional causes of adversity in childhood. So here, I'm not going to go through all of these. These are all of the things that you all know, right? And what I'm going to suggest is that these are important, yes, but the way we approach them, we might want to adopt a different way. There are these deep drivers of new forms of adversity. So we're going through a change of age. There was an agricultural revolution, then an industrial revolution. We're going through an information technology revolution, which is causing major disruptions in our social ecosystems. The way we live is not the way that we have been biologically designed to live, right? The way we live is not the way that we have been socialized to live. Things are changing more rapidly for young people today. We have new cultural forms, value streams, production models, our economies, oh my gosh. Right? There's large accelerators of change, globalization, technology, climate change, other megatrends, urbanization, inequality, migration, all of these things that we all know about and talk about on the daily. The speed of change is accelerating. There's mismatches between human development, family development, community development, and economic development. And these disruptive conflicts are changing our life course pathways, creating for what unfortunately looks to be a very unstable and insecure future. The patterns of epidemiology are also changing. So we're seeing increases in chronic health problems. We're seeing a growing prevalence of mental health disorders. There's a greater appreciation of the role of the impact of neurodevelopment on health problems. And there's a growing number of children with multiple conditions, these comorbidities. These are called syndemics, where we have multiple health challenges happening at the same time, and they're exacerbating each other's in ways that we have not been able to measure and predict. Children today are working in a new challenging time. I'm a child of the 70s. The way we lived are different than the way kids live today. There's persistent structural and resistant levels of child and family poverty. Our war on poverty is not working. We have growing and solidifying inequality, rising levels of adversity relative to context. All of this stuff, these are things that we already know, so I'm not going to belabor them. Please review them. And by the way, when I reference any articles, they'll be referenced on the bottom yellow bar there, so I'd encourage you to read those as well. But I did share Ace, Place, and Race, Charlie Bruner's paper. Charles Bruner is brilliant individual, really helped the formulation of how we understand context, which we'll get into deeper. So Socrates, the secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. I think that we have an opportunity to really embrace some of these thinking, some of these strategies. This is the way, I'm the GIS unit chief, so I'm a mapping nerd. And the way we see the world is something like this. So you have child 3, child 2, and child 1 growing in up different communities. Because of GIS, we think of spatial factors and layers all the time. So here are examples of things that have an impact on early child development: crime, access to supportive services, socioeconomic conditions, the built environment, strong neighborhood relationships, sociohistoric context. History is very, very important when you're trying to get at the root, the cause of these issues. And then the issue of topography matters. It does matter. And when you look at things this way, it's very easy to say, well, I guess child 1 or child 2 or child 3 are going to expect it to have different developmental outcomes. Living in these contexts is actually have impact on a person's life. And when you see these things this way, you actually, it begs the question, well, then how can we measure it, right? From the very earliest parts of a person's life, and then how can we fix it? So this is, because I'm a geographer, this is how I see the world. Population measures are very important. They're part of these complex dynamics. Environmental influences are varied. They include both social and physical factors. Individual factors interact with each other. Sometimes they mediate, sometimes they exacerbate, and the strength of that changes over the life course. And then also, finally, it's really difficult to measure these neighborhood effects because policy changes can interrupt our surveillance efforts. Without quality data consistently collected over time, we're just working in the dark. Causation is also very hard to prove. And then, of course, I referenced Robert Sampson. Please read that article. It is very important. So it's time to rethink. Not only about the services, but also about our systems. We need to embrace complexity. We need to scale the change needed. Complex systems need to learn their way forward, and that Strategies 2 is actually starting with the learning community. You guys are on track. You're doing it the right way. And then also systems perform better when the service sectors are aligned, right? So we need to think cross-sector. A little bit about a critique on some of the work that we're doing, not you in the room, obviously. This is a systems level critique, okay? So marginal risk strategies were very useful and important when you had a normally distributed level of risk. So here we see the higher the line is the greater proportion of the population. For those of you who know about statistics, the middle right there is the mean, the median, and the mode. When it's normally distributed, they're the same number. You have your levels of risk on the bottom. High risk population, low risk population. We've all seen that before. When you have a marginal risk strategy, you're usually looking for those at-risk population, children who are at risk, or anybody, who would be susceptible to a disease to be at risk. And the idea was always to move the at-risk population into that larger, body of work. You want to move them over, right? You're identifying individuals. There's some problems with that. It presumes the risks to be heterogeneous and not consistent across the entire population, which we know that's not the case. These direct services are generally costly. They're not scalable for the whole population. And it focuses on the cause of the cases. The question that underlies this work is, why do some individuals have a disease? And what can I do to intervene on that level, on that individual person? This is from Sick Individuals and Sick Populations. Again, great read, please read it. Now that risk distribution is skewed, because we're not seeing normal distribution on risk anymore, we're seeing something that looks like this. This is a skewed risk. You'll see that more people are now at the high risk, right, in the high risk area. Moving individuals over now doesn't really work. We need strategies to shift the entire curve, okay? This attempts to remove the underlying causes that make these issues common. There is a drawback. It does offer small benefits to each individual. That's the prevention paradox. But it does focus on the cause of the cases. And the underlying question would be, why do some populations have high rates of disease while others do not? Which is your fundamental equity challenge. I see heads nodding, so I'm going to move on. This is the work of my colleague, Neil Hawthorne. This is how we look at developmental outcomes. You see in yellow those things that are having a negative impact on human development. And you see in the blue boxes those things that are having a positive or supportive effect on human development. And when you look at the end of that, the difference between the people in blue, yellow, and orange, that right there is another type of equity challenge. As a geographer, we look at it like this. And this is from work that we did with the South LA. Shout out to Anaheim. The person that helped us design this is now your district superintendent, Chris Downey. When you think about it, they thought about what's the kind of visual infographic that would make sense to the general population. And they said, oh, it's like a game of chutes and ladders. The chutes being those things that have a negative impact on healthy development, the ladders being things that have a positive impact on healthy development. And if you notice, the top line would be your levels of risk, right? And the first thing that happens when you think about it this way is a recognition that not all playing boards are the same. Some communities have way more chutes and some communities have way more ladders. This is another one of our equity challenges that we have to address. So we can start mapping these things now and measuring them, which we'll get into. This is Waldo Tobler. He's a geographer. This is the first rule of geography. Everything is related to everything else, but near things are more related to distant things. The EDI is the early development instrument. It's actually it's a very important measure in all of the work that helped us understand all of the stuff that we're presenting to you today. It's a holistic measure. It covers 5 domains of a child's development. It's feasible to implement at scale. It's collected every 3 years by kindergarten teachers online using Recall. It takes about 10-15 minutes for them to fill it out for each kid. It's internationally validated, developed by McMaster's University in Canada, by Dan Offord and Magdalena Janus. Those are some of the nerds who are on that list. On the other side of the cool people, Stevie Wonder was on one side, and we had some nerds on the other side. Successfully used in over 15 countries across Canada, national indicators in Australia, strong reliability and validity, predicts later standardized test scores. And by the way, when I say nerd, I mean that in the most positive way, because I am one myself, and I'm an egomaniac. I like myself. So these are the 5 developmental domains: communication skills, language and cognitive, emotional maturity, physical health, well-being, social competence. The beauty of the EDI is you can see that more than 50% of the measures are social and emotional. Changes the frame of the way we look at kids and the way we measure kids and the way we assess kids. Somebody used a very awkward term. Kids are not just brains on sticks. People don't like that, but for some reason it resonated with me. There's more to a person than just their cognitive development. It's a community snapshot. It's a population measure, so it lets you know child's healthy development at school readiness. It's not intended to be reported at an individual level. It informs place-based efforts to optimize the health and development of all young children, and the results can be used in 2 ways. One, a look back to see how the collective efforts, how are we doing to prepare our kids for school, and then moving forward, how can we optimize the children's success as they progress through school. So these measures are very, very important. Now here's the question that I rose earlier. I said there's some ominous connotations to the first question. When we see the inequality and the outcomes that we see today, we need to recognize that they are not random or by chance. Every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. So anytime you look at a statistic that indicates that one population is performing more poorly than another population, we have to remember that it's probably a reflective of some insidious policies, historical discrimination, structural racism, and policies of white supremacy. It's hard to say it, but it needs to be said. This is from the work of the Pop Change Learning community, Sara Croix, one of the folks who helped us do this. In fact, she's one of the people that helps me manage the work that I'm not doing, that I'm supposed to be doing. There are multiple factors at play in a given community that have an effect on population level health. And although most of this is studied using complexity science theory, by the way, any complexity scientists in the room? I don't think so. Very confusing. They're right, but it's very confusing, even to me. In order to speak about it in a way that makes sense, we've simplified it and talked about it among three very important dimensions of our work. One of them is, what are the community contextual factors that are having an impact on a person's population health outcomes? That can be measured. What is the resident collective efficacy? How well do the residents navigate these things that are affecting them? Also can be measured. However, we don't have instruments that do it correctly. Finally, how are the community systems functioning to mediate all of those things? Also can be measured, and we're not doing it, but I want to give a shout out to Meg Hargraves from NORC because she's trying to figure that out. So when you look at population data, which would be that blue box in the prior, slide, which was the outcome. And when we look at population data, this is generally the only thing we look at, right? So let's say each of these kids is representative of a neighborhood. And you can see if you were to, and then how high they are, their vertical leap is how well they're doing on that population measure. So I'm gonna ask a question, which kids are doing the best? I'm gonna name a person. Who likes to talk? Janice, you wanna talk? If you were to look at that, which kids are doing the best on this population metric? Hold on 1 second, we got a microphone coming. People on the internet, please be patient.
I would say the first one and the last one, who are above the vulnerable categories.
Excellent. That is how we've been assessing population health for a very long time. And Janice was correct. And that could lead us to a whole bunch of dangerous assumptions about what's happening in these communities. But what if we had a measure of community context? It would look like that. Let's say those boxes are different levels of advantage. Then if I were to ask Janice the same question, we don't need to do it because it's obvious. What kid's doing the best? It's the kid who would have been just in the middle. We would not have known, we would not have cared, and we would be studying the wrong communities, and we'd be making policy decisions on the wrong factors, and we wouldn't be doing ourselves or the communities we're serving a service. Charles Bruner, Ace Race and Place, the article that you read, hopefully you all read it. Show of hands, anybody read it? Internet, did you read it? Did you guys read it? I encourage you to read it. We're all very, very busy. Please read it when you get a chance. It's eye-opening and it's shocking and it's all sorts of greatness. He and his colleagues have mapped out, so we're in this kind of this green space right now of population kind of ecosystem measures. So there's something called the Opportunity Atlas, Raj Chetty and his group at Harvard. Everybody's coming up with a metric on how to assess community contexts. I like Charles Bruner's one because I read his paper and I thought, oh my gosh, he's saying everything that I say. And if he's saying it, and since we just agreed that I was an egomaniac, then I'm thinking that he's right. But also, he used a geography and a bit of data that's available for everybody in the US and its territories. So anybody at any census tract can get a sense of where they are on this measure, which is really very important when measuring across communities. 10 negative community characteristics. Some of these are written like as if they're positive things. For instance, percent owner occupied housing, you would think, or the percent of head of household with interest, dividend, or rent income. These are wealthy people. But the way the data were analyzed, these would be the communities with the lowest rates of these things. And the way they did it was like one standard deviation from the norm. And so basically these are can be articulated as measures of concentrated deprivation. Classified those risk factors into, geographies into 4 measures of neighborhood risk: 0, low, medium, and high, and you can see how those are broken out. This is what you would look like if you mapped spatial inequality using that measure in Los Angeles County. And I'm sure for those of you in Riverside County, in San Bernardino County, may not recognize this, but if you're an Angelino, you know this. This is not new to you. SPA 6 looks incredibly, obvious. These are the levels of risk. Interestingly, this actually maps to the EDI, really interesting. This is a monotonic scale, meaning that it's only in one direction. The lower level of risk factors you have in your neighborhood, the lower level of proportion of kids vulnerable on the EDI, the higher levels of risk factors, and these are across all of the domains of development, and the summative vulnerable on one or more domains. Because I have the honor of working with a guy, Josh Bader. I always say he's the smartest guy in the room, but it's because he only has one person in his office. But he's a brilliant man. He came up with this bivariate matrix. You see the vulnerability class, the risk factors on the bottom there, Charles Brunner, and then the level of risk on the EDI. The gray, it would be the diagonal, right? You might have heard of these terms, off diagonals or positive and negative deviance. The areas in red would be, they have 0 risk factors, yet they have the highest rates of kids vulnerable on the EDI. That would be negative deviance. And the areas in blue would be the places that have the highest level of risk, yet they have the lowest levels of population vulnerable on the EDI in our US national sample. And you get a perfect bell-shaped curve, which is quite lovely to see all the time, right? 2% on either end. And we can map these data now. This is Pasadena, California. This is the city where I live. This is how it is measured on the EDI. The areas in dark green are the areas of the highest proportion of kids vulnerable on the EDI. The lighter the green you have, the lower the rates of kids vulnerable on the EDI. This is what it looks like you looking at it using that measure of neighborhood risk that Charles Brunner developed. And this is what it looks like when you compare it. And you can see, for the most part, it's what you'd expect to see. But there are 2 places where they're actually outperforming the expectation. This is El Monte. It's also El Monte, Rosemead, and Mountain View school districts. This is what it looks like on the EDI. I explained to you before, we see where there's kids are having struggling, some challenges, those dark green areas, the light green areas where they're doing well. This is what El Monte looks like using the neighborhood risk. This is what it looks like come together. Mostly blue, mostly positive outcomes. You're seeing positive deviance, which to all of us says, hey, El Monte is a great place to start figuring things out. We should spend more time in El Monte to find out what they're doing right. This is South LA. You see the patterns of risk, vulnerability on the EDI, darker green, meaning the higher rates of vulnerability, lighter green, meaning they're doing better. Again, these data are normed to our national sample. This is comparing the EDI in this community with the EDI in places like New Orleans, San Antonio, Orange County. We're all over the place now. We have over 370,000 kids that we've assessed using the EDI. This is what it looks like using Brunner's risk index. This is what we probably already know. And this is what it looks like when you compare the 2. All positive deviance, meaning that there is a lot of stuff happening positive in people's development in South LA that we are not highlighting or that gets lost in a lot of the data that we're using. And it's been a while since I've actually looked at any child abuse or child referral rates, but as I recall, SPA used to have the highest rates of out-of-home placement. Is that still the case? Janice, do you know? Highest rates of out-of-home placement, is that still in South LA? Still is? Yeah.
It is still.
Okay. The interesting thing about looking at the data this way is that we can actually have these learning communities. Obviously, if you're on track, on trajectory, if you're on the diagonal, there's not much room for learning. But when you're off diagonals, you have all these opportunities for learning communities. Every place in zero that has the highest rates of vulnerability needs to be talking to the places that have zero risk factors. Like, what are we doing wrong? Like, how can we take advantage of all our wealth? Places of high risk, places that are doing better, positive deviance. These are the natural incubation laboratories that we need to understand what's happening. What are they doing that's providing this? Is it just the population? Is it what we're doing? Remember, there's 3 different measures that we need to assess. Is it just that the residents themselves are just resilient and doesn't matter? Or is it because of the effectiveness of our programs? We don't know yet. Again, I'm presenting this data to you, obviously to be provocative. We don't have answers to these things. And what's sad is that we aren't arraying our science or our policies to get at the answers to these. In fact, these things have been invisible up until now. And I worked at First 5 LA. I helped create those maps that identified the geographies of risk that led to the best start communities. But why are we not all looking at it in a smarter way is the question I'm asking everybody in the room. We're gonna do a time check. So I'm gonna wrap this up very quickly. I just wanted to show you that you can use these data in really innovative ways where we can actually graph racial inequality from the earliest phases of a person's life. Again, using the early development instrument. Each of these quintiles are median income quintiles. Every census tract has a median income. Every kid that we have and the EDI, we've assessed them. And we found this pattern. Let's look at the top line purple color. That's the summative vulnerable on 1 or more domains. And you can see this is something that's not new to anybody. Areas that have high economic, highest incomes have the lowest rates of kids vulnerable on the EDI. Communities that have the lowest incomes have higher rates of kids vulnerable on the EDI. And it begs a question, which is, this is all races and all ethnicities. Will the pattern remain the same across different racial and ethnic groups? Are some populations more vulnerable to effects of community level poverty? Are other populations more resilient to the effects of community level poverty? And finally, do families in prosperous communities all have the same levels of advantage, or do they differ across racial and ethnic groups? This is what it looks like when you do that same analysis by racial or ethnic category of the EDI. We can see that broken out by data, the general pattern remains the same. It's higher on the poor income quintile, it's lower on the higher income quintile. But the degree of the slope changes for different racial and ethnic groups. This is provocative data. We're not, again, this is a population level measure, and it should be reviewed not as the qualities, innate characteristics of the populations, but how it's a systems level diagnostic, right? So we need to be mindful that that's what we're actually doing here. To make sense of those differences, we have innovated something called a racial ethnicity equity gap measure. It's a very simple statistic so anybody can understand it. It's basically one population, you look at the mean of all races, and you calculate what's the difference. And that'll give you that. And with that calculation, you can see, using all these economic quintiles, those arrows being the arrow for the African American population, you can see that the size of those arrows change as you get further. And we decided to graph that like this. This is the distance of each bar would be your economic quintile from the poorest to the wealthiest, the darker color, right? The length of the bar is the distance from the mean. And when we see this, what do we see? We see that there's a consistent rate of vulnerability across all of the economic quintiles in the African American population, but in the wealthiest communities, it's twice as big. This reminds me of David Williams' work on everyday discrimination. This means that all of our policies cannot be race neutral, right? And they cannot just merely be income focused. We have to change the way we're thinking about our work that recognizes this. This is what it looks like across all ethnic groups. The reason why the color is different and why the pattern's different, but it's roughly the same, is because we wanted to create a smaller sample because we're trying to get this published and we need to make sure that the data were representative. The strategy was exactly the same. African American population, Asian population, Hispanic, Latinx population, the white population, and then the other. I really want to call attention to the light blue, which is the white population. When we talk about equity, a lot of times we think just in racial terms, but we don't think about it in terms of class. And in this instance, the white population, the poorest communities actually have the greatest deviance from the norm as everybody else. And the slope is strongest, which suggests two things. One, that they probably live in systems that are the least racialized because the money is the most important, obviously. But also, poor white people are suffering across the US in ways that we need to recognize. And because the society did not recognize that other populations were suffering before, we can't use that as an excuse not to recognize the suffering of poor white people. We need to expand our circle of human concern. Okay, I don't want to get too emotional, so I'm going to just blast through this. These are the different domains of development. And the last one, which is general communication and general knowledge, I just want to point out that this is one instance where the African American population is doing better than than the average on nearly all economic domains, except again for the wealthiest. This is Neil Hawthorne. I'm lucky to work with Neil. As you can see, he's a man of few words. Just kidding. Health systems are in the midst of a transformation from the 1.0 version that was focused on prolonging life through acute care, injuries, and infectious diseases, to the currently evolving 2.0 systems that is focused primarily on avoiding disability through chronic disease treatment and management, to the 3.0 system that will optimize the health of all through a broad approach that recognizes the social and environmental influences on the development of health and disease. Moving from 2.0 to aspirational 3.0 systems will require not just incremental improvements, but disruptive and transformative innovations. He knows what he's talking about. We're launching something called All Children Thrive. My colleague who's in the room, Jennifer Lopez, is on that team. The intention is to build networks of people and places that are working together to identify strategies and policies that can help children thrive, whole populations. It's a learning network, right? There's a response to troubling trends in California. 30% of adolescents report feelings of depression. The rate of mental health and related hospitalizations for youth is increasing. Rate of self-reported mental health needs among adolescents is increasing. Many of these are related to ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. But as we were looking at some of the data, we also knew that there's adverse childhood environments. All Children Thrive is a movement that offers a statewide strategic agenda to measurably and sustainably reduce lifelong corrosive effects of childhood poverty and inequality. So far in this initiative, we've been given $10 million from the California legislature. It's a partnership between CDPH, community partners, PH advocates, and my center, UCLA Center for Healthier Children, Families, and Communities. Also want to point out that we use the same letters in your mission statement. So it's interesting that we're working together now. It's designed by national and international experts. I was recently afforded the opportunity to go to Leiden in the Netherlands, where people are trying to tackle the same thing. There's a 3-year equity-focused, community-driven initiative. It takes a city approach supporting families through evidence-based programs and services that build on community resilience, reduce adversity, trauma, and advance the conditions that allow children to thrive. Stay tuned, it's in development, so more to come on that. I think I did it in 35, 40 maybe? 40. I was off by 5 minutes. Sorry, internet, I thought I could do it in 35. But I think I got emotional when I talked about the inequality, and it makes me pause. So now's the time to have a conversation. You weren't here in the beginning. We have a new person in the room, everybody, and I just want to respect that. I was letting people know that we're not telling people what is what. We're helping them measure things, and I'm just an egghead, and you guys are the experts on how to do it. So if we can have a conversation about what are the implications for this new framing on the work, because you are the experts that are going to be able to figure out what to do about these disturbing data. And if we can have the conversation I'd be here for a month if you allow me, but for the rest of the portion of the section, if we can have that conversation, I'd appreciate it. And I'd like to open it up for any questions, thoughts, any anxieties. It is emotional. I got emotional. What do you guys think?
I'm so sorry, we have a microphone, so I just want to remind everybody to give us a second to run it to you, so our audience here.
So anybody want to talk? Who's going to go first? Internet? Oh.
Apologies for missing the first part, because I can tell it was outstanding. 2 questions come to mind as I was listening to that. So the part of the strategy for all communities, Burke Harris, the news for California, involved in that, and how do we get engaged at a greater level so we can get more investments around these issues? And then also, as you were talking about some of the racial disparities, I was thinking about the book written some years ago called The Minor Scenario. It looked at how to fix issues, you first have to start at the lowest common denominator, which is focusing on the issues of Black people. And as if you fix the issues of Black people, it tends to raise the boats of everyone else. And so as you were looking at some of the data, it made me start to think of, not only is it important to understand the impact of discrimination, but we also need to look at the importance of discrimination to fix the problem. And so when I think about our work as part of different agencies and how we are trying to focus like a laser on certain issues for children and families, how can we incorporate aspects of discrimination with an equity lens in order to make that kind of change that we need to see?
Word. I can't agree more. As to the first question, it would be nice to talk to Nadine Burke Harris about this. I think that she has her finger on the pulse of this. We are in conversation with Gavin Newsom has appointed people in the early childhood space. So Giannina Perez and Chris Perry we're trying to figure out how to use this to use these metrics and to identify disparities early on is very important. In fact, one of the many things I'm late on doing is I had told them that in the fall I would give them a statewide analysis. So it reminds me that I have to finish that up to give them the statewide analysis of these exact same data. As it relates to the other item that you're talking about, in my space, I want people to have that rich and vibrant conversation. And what we need to do is provide for you the data to make that case. Because we used to use a term called universal progressivism. The new term now is targeted universalism. The Haas Institute, and a shout out to John Powell, right? We had talked and shared this stuff with Chris Edley. Apparently they're best friends, did not know that. At least that's what Chris Edley said. I don't know if John Powell would say the same thing, who knows? But yeah, we need to do that, I agree. And the thing that we also need to recognize too is that communities are doing fantastic things, and universities and policymakers are slow to respond to. And so what we want, the idea behind All Children Thrive is that we want cities to be the incubators of these kind of new learnings. We want them to be labs of social innovation. And we need to do it in a transparent way so everybody can learn with one another. If they are given the opportunity to discuss and analyze their own problems, and if we can help them solve their problems better, that's where real power is, right? It shifts the dynamic. So yeah, I agree with you, 100%.
An online question. Is the EDI a free tool? I think some people had questions around how to access that tool, the EDI, and how you could implement that, I think, in...
Okay, First Five Orange County has implemented the EDI. They collected countywide, and they have been doing it for a number of years. First Five LA has decided to collect the EDI over all the entire county. We're in the process of doing that. So I'm looking at you, San Bernardino. We need your help, First Five San Bernardino, to collect data so that we can actually have EDI in San Bernardino. We had a very important conference, the Learners Today, Leaders Tomorrow Summit. So we are in conversations with San Diego to get it over all through San Diego as well. I'm a big data evangelist. I think that we need population health data to do these exact same things. The reason I'm at UCLA is because of the EDI. And it is my hope and dream that the EDI become a national measure like it is in Australia. So we need your help moving it forward. Okay, then finally, the place that do have the EDI data, because we honor the fact that it's local data, it's the communities that are collecting the data that you would need to talk to get access to it. We, as a central repository of the data, we can't just disseminate it freely. So there's protocols to honor the work of the folks on the ground before we start sharing these things. Anything else? I see heads shaking. People overwhelmed, tired, little overwhelmed. Okay. So, yeah, sure.
So Efren, I'm going to come up and join you, and I'm going to ask the question up here with you, next to me, because I want the audience to see us together.
Oh, yeah, right.
So I'm sitting back here, and I'm just absorbing all this incredible technology that you have such a great grasp on, and looking at the maps and wondering how to apply this back in my little community of San Luis Obispo County, and how I use this information when I dialogue, not just with my colleagues, but with people who contract us to do the work. Because as a director of a nonprofit, I'm responsible to make sure that we tell the folks who have invested into us, how are we doing? And what I'm learning today is about the systems as opposed to just a program delivering an output. And I want to be better at articulating this back home. So I guess I'm not really asking the question as much as it is, I'm just sharing my pain or the reality of the work. We have to produce some sort of measurement, and we all do. And yet what's exciting to me is that we're able to use this mapping technology to really dive a little deeper in a way that a piece of paper and counting widgets and assessments can do. So can you expand upon what I just said a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah, so the reason I placed in the slide the difference between marginal risk strategy and population level strategies is to really get at that. So fortunately, you guys are all part of the beginning of a new, larger movement that I've now kind of hopefully roped you in. We need to start using the new language. We need to talk to funders using this new language. We need a vocal and active constituency arguing for sensitive and appropriate population health measures. We need to understand that you have to do both. You do have to do direct services, but just doing the direct services without doing the population level stuff, to be honest, it's kind of it's not the best use of folks' resources, right? When they expend their resources. So yeah, we need your help. I'm here asking you guys to help us as much as I'm here offering our ability to help you.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
And Jolene as well.
So I agree with everything you presented, and I'm excited. So my question is, how do we stay connected with all of you after this? Like, is there going to be invitations for us to participate, or maybe trainings on how to get started with tools or things like that? Because I know usually with these types of things, we leave and we're so excited and motivated, and then we leave and that's it. And I don't want that to be it. So I just wanted to know what are the next steps, and will there be those opportunities, even those that are not local too? Like, how do we stay connected that way as well?
Well, one, you have your learning network. So I would encourage you to continue this conversation here, because remember, this is just an opening, a glimpse of a new way of doing things. I want you to really think about how to make it practical. Because to be honest, I'm just sharing some basic information and I don't have a plan because I don't know how to do it. The reason why Jennifer's here is because she is a great person to be able to know how to connect and communicate with other people. I prefer sitting in front of a computer and looking at numbers and coming up with different ways of analyzing the data. So I'm sure she has some things to say, and I want to allow her to do that. The third thing is, as All Children Thrive is in development, we're still in our design phase. So we're not even really there yet. As it really picks up and we realize that this is a great utilization of that Mental Health Services Act dollars to think about these things in a certain way, we know that there's also Type E waiver dollars. We know that there's also First 5 LA dollars. We know that there's local community foundations. We know that there are resources there if we start to think about things as part of this larger movement and not so much the way we think about things as the sustaining our programs. I think that we'll see a bigger return on our investments, but also we'll have the resources so we can maintain and fund a learning system. What I don't have is a platform for learning. Again, looking at you, First Fives, if you're on the line. We need to develop a platform that actually presents all these data locally, that allows for folks to open their activities up to be part of a learning lab, to share their successes and their challenges honestly. We need to change the way we do our evaluation, not to measure the success of what was invested, what we made our investments in, but how well we're expanding our learning so that, you know, people aren't afraid to fail. If you have an idea about something that's going to work, take a shot, try it, you know, fail. Let's be honest, I didn't go to college. I am a self-taught, I'm an autodidact is what they call us, right? I only learned through failure. So as you can see with all the information I provided, I've been failing for a long time. And we have to be comfortable with that. You know, take a shot, fail at something, but use it to advance our learning and understanding. Oh, I think, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, this is Jennifer. Shout out to everybody in Ventura County. Jennifer Lopez from Oxnard. Hello, Ventura County. Okay. Here's what I was thinking. I started thinking too, everybody here is thinking about their own local community, the work they're doing, and then this idea for training. Like I heard, like Efren, you sparked our interest. We're not sure how we bridge the gap from our day-to-day and what you just presented to us, but I certainly didn't feel any resistance in the room. I felt like you are among friends, and I'm assuming also online. So I don't know how much more time we have for this section, but I don't know if okay, maybe about 20 minutes, and then I'll defer to the person online, but maybe it's a way of breaking down what would bridge the gaps. You mentioned excitement about training, and I'm with you. We get into these things where how do we take this with us? So maybe breaking down when you think about training or you think about next steps, what does that look like? What is it about what Efren talked about that would be important to know? Or are there people that are working in each of your communities or in partnership that you think should be connected? Or what do you feel like it's going to take, or what are the barriers? You know, for me, since I'm just learning from Efren as well, I think I'm still trying to understand, you know, what are you currently being asked to collect in terms of data, or how is the work that you're doing being evaluated, and how do people that are coming together of like mind try to collectively shift that focus to even introduce one or two things that might help move us in this direction. Because I think we all, I mean, I know for me when he's talking, I'm looking at the map, but I'm thinking of people and communities that I know that are incredible in places that other people have written off, right? And that that's what we're trying to do, is shift that piece. So I'll go ahead and defer to the person online, and then maybe we can come back and decide if any of that would be helpful for people in the group.
All right. So couple of questions. I think there are some folks wanting to know if Riverside is using this, is collecting this data, and who the point of contact would be for them, as well as who are you working with in San Diego to start collecting this data. And then really quickly, someone wanted to know if the EDI is based on a predictive model, and if so, which one?
That last question is a little bit difficult. I can try to answer it in as best I can in the common tongue. First things first, Riverside County. The reason I'm here today is because we made a presentation to Riverside Prevention Group, and they said, "Hey, this is something that we need to talk about." There are folks from Riverside First 5 who's on that. So we have not formally engaged with them to collect the data, but I think that we probably should pursue that further. So obviously my contact information is available. I will link you to Dr. Lisa Stanley. She heads up the Transforming Early Childhood Community Systems Initiative, obviously overseeing the whole shop on collecting the EDI data. In San Diego, their executive director was in attendance at a presentation I made, and she said, "Yeah, this is right. This is what we should be doing. Let's do it." And so it's incumbent upon me to respond to her, because I have to figure out how to best navigate that. So I'm going to be in conversations with the executive director of First 5 San Diego to do that. Anybody else who has any inquiries, please send them to me, and I will forward them to Dr. Lisa Stanley. If I had her email memorized, I think it's lisastanley@mednet.ucla.edu. So hopefully, yeah. So if you can remember that, write that down. Send her an email. Say, "Hey, I'm a representative of X county, and I like to collect the EDI data." We're collecting it all over the U.S. now, so we really want to fill out that California map. Now, as to its predictive, so there's multiple questions, I think, in terms of that were raised about the EDI. Predictive validity is one way of assessing the validity of any instrument. When we say that it's predictive, that it passes that predictive validity test, that means that the instrument itself was designed as a population measure to see whether or not a child is on, or populations are on, healthy developmental trajectories. The way to validate that is to then compare those data that were collected on the EDI to the third grade performance. And in the Canadian models, the Australian models, and in our US sample, it does. Across all domains, works the same all the time, every time. And across different ethnic groups. So we know there's now racial challenges with that as well. Then there's another type of validity, is whether or not the instrument itself would be consistent if different people fill it out. That would be called an inter-rater reliability assessment. When we do it using the inter-rater reliability assessment, it works the same every single time, different people filling it out. There's one other form of assessment, which is called IRT. I will not go over that because that's like talking to you guys about complexity science. That analysis has not been done yet. So that would be one final form of validity testing. But since the other two tests for validation actually work, you begin to ask yourself, why are we going through so much trouble? Why don't we just use it and start making plans around it? Because at least what ends up happening is there is no perfect tool. There's no perfect instrument. There's no perfect validation. In fact, the more conversations that we have, getting to that little bit about how valid is the instrument in that regard, it's basically, there's a logical fallacy of reduction to the point of absurdity. And what happens is that we keep questioning whether or not these metrics are right in every context in this way. And we do it in a way that actually hurts our ability to learn about what's happening and how we're going to move forward. And since I'm not an academic, I'm a community organizer first. I just happen to have an affinity for numbers and maps. And I'm old and I've been doing it a long time. I think that I think that we shouldn't be too worried about whether or not the instruments are the precise instruments we should use, when in fact what we're doing is we're making invisible challenges that are detectable at the earliest stages of a person's life. I would really question you to ask yourselves, is it worth it? Is it worth it to deny an ability to measure the health of a community? All that to say, but it does, the EDI does pass those validity assessments. So it's not even like I'm suggesting us to use an instrument that's not validated. So anyways, that's just my thoughts on that. I could talk about that for days too.
Thank you, Efren, for all the really thought-provoking and interesting information. I've heard you speak a couple times and I learned something every single time, and I come with more questions. I was just wondering kind of how far along would you say the LA County data collection is? I know particular communities in LA have it, like Magnolia, and I know you said El Monte and Pasadena, but as a whole for LA County, any thoughts or updates about that?
I think the biggest challenge in LA, because of the structures that exist, or the systems and education that exist, was LAUSD. Most of the kids who are in public schools are in LAUSD. It's the second biggest school district in the United States. We had very fruitful conversations on account of, and I'm going to give a shout out to a person, Avery Saratan from First 5 LA, fantastic ability to actually work well with LAUSD. We're on deck to collect all of LAUSD, I think, within the next few years. We've already collected all of local district South, which I gave a shout out to the Anaheim person in the room because Chris Downing was there and he really helped us in that regard. We collected data already in LAUSD West. These are local districts, by the way. LAUSD West and LAUSD East. We still need to collect, I think, in LAUSD Central, LAUSD North, East, and Northwest, I forget. But we're on track to collect all of LAUSD. And then once we have all of that, then there is another level of expansion. Those tactical decisions about how to do that are in the hands of our esteemed colleagues at First 5 LA. Again, I'm not the best person to work with people because, you know, that's just not my thing. I don't know. I'm not very political, you know, and so they have a strategy. So I wouldn't want to invade on the strategy, but their effort is and their investment is to do collect it countywide.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I had a secondary question. I really am interested in the communities that you talked about that have positive deviances.
Yes, yeah.
And how much learning is possible in those communities and what are they doing? What do they have asset-wise going on? And I just wondered, are there any learning communities or particular inquiries happening in some of those communities now?
Yeah, First 5 LA, First 5 Orange County have invested in something called the Southern California Learning Community, very similar to Strategies 2.0, SoCal Learning Community, where these folks are getting together on a regular basis. Our next meeting is actually coming up. We just had one in El Monte just, I think last week, right, Jennifer? Was it last week? Yeah, so there's a vibrant learning community going through that. What we need to do, however, is we need to develop a platform that allows other people to find out what's happening in those learning communities. That requires an investment in technology. Again, I'm going to give one more hard wink to First Fives. If you can help me in that regard, that would be very, very helpful because we do need money to do that. And so yeah, we need money to do it. But we want to create a transparent and open learning community that people can assess online to figure out what's going on as observers, as students, but also as part of these running their own incubations and labs to figure out what to do. It's my next big project that I have to, after we get the EDI, universal national EDI and statewide, and this All Children Thrive, it's the other big thing that we're working on, yeah.
Well, this is Jennifer again, at the risk of stepping out of school, so to speak. We could also just go old school, and maybe these two learning communities could find a way to connect and share in that regard. Because I love that idea, and I think we all are trying to get to the big question that Efren's asking. So I'm new enough to not know if that's an easy thing to do or a hard thing to do, but I thought I'd just put it on the table since I was kind of going back to what people feel like would be some concrete steps to bridge the gap.
Are we on time?
So I'm going to segue. This is Lisa Fraser, and I'm going to segue.
Are we going time? Are
We're good.
over?
We got 10 more minutes. We don't go.
Oh, okay.
We want you to stay
I
with
thought,
us.
Hook was going to come and
No,
pull me out.
10 minutes.
Apollo
I
style.
want to just build upon what Jennifer just shared, because here we are. We're hosting a learning community for this regional Southern California region. So we are 9 counties. We are San Luis Obispo all the way being the most northern point, and all the way down, not just to San Diego, but Imperial County. Let's not forget Imperial County. And we all have a lot of folks in that county that want to be engaged with this as well and improve their understanding on how they do this work. So the opportunity is this. This is number 1 of 4 learning communities for this year. We want to build upon what we're learning today, because it is a lot to learn. It's it's not the kind of reading we do typically, except for Efren. You know, this is what he does, and he's here along with the other colleagues to help translate it, help let it simmer in our heads a little bit, because that's how we learn. We exchange, we have conversations, we have sense of humors, we sort of build upon it. And so when we come together in December 5th to continue this conversation, we'll be building the blocks on what we're learning today and carrying it forward. Now, how to connect it to the learning communities that are occurring through the First 5 LA and First 5 Orange County, that can be discovered along this way. And that's the opportunity, because we want to learn, those of us who are I don't live in Imperial County, but they want to be connected. And this is one way to do this.
Okay, I have a mic. I don't need.
Oh, you.
I'm always the reason.
You're here to help me.
The reason I was inching away is not because I'm trying not to be close to you. I don't want feedback. I don't know what happens when you put 2 microphones together. I like standing next to you.
Thank you.
Yeah. There is a thing I need to say in response to what you just said, which is I recognize that learning communities themselves, there is an intimacy there, and you need to be frank. And it doesn't always work to have just open, like this should be your learning community. Say what you want in an open and frank way without fear of it being misinterpreted, because let's be honest, we do live in political spaces. So whereas I think that it's good to merge together some kind of strategies of integration, I do want to respect and I honor what happens in learning communities. They should be placed for open, frank, frustrating, sometimes angry discourse, but all towards learning with one another. And so that's just the thing that I do know that, I would not want to also suggest to open up another, but there needs to, I don't know if we need summits. I can't organize on this level, but if you guys can help me figure out how to do it, great idea. I'm not saying it shouldn't be, maybe we should, but if we can also create spaces for their own individual, learning to continue too. Because who knows, as soon as I leave the door, woof, that was too much. Let's just go on with business. Who knows?
No, I appreciate those thoughts, because I feel oftentimes we are on our heels, whereas people are involved in urban planning and looking at similar data, and they're thinking about population rates and mortality, and they're thinking about what are the opportunities around housing, and as well as new labor markets in the future. They're always on their toes, and we're always on our heels dealing with the issues of our disparate communities. But then there's another faction that meets and talks very candidly with one another, and they're always on their toes. And so it makes me think of looking at the difference between the amount of time, energy, and focus on our side compared to the amount of time, energy, and focus and resources that is applied toward planning for the future based on some of the results of this data versus us planning to see how we can save lives as the results of this data. And that disproportionality between the resources involved in one group of work versus ours seems to me as a major issue that we also have to resolve. Because again, like you said, if we don't develop some type of rhythm of coming together and keeping the collective work focused, it's really easy to kind of get back into our own rhythm of just doing the same thing. And then we come back again 10 years from now looking at more data and it's exactly the same or worse.
We have 5 minutes.
Hi, everyone. It's Natalie. So to piggyback on what you were just saying, Efren, I'm wondering if you could speak to the need for agility in our learning. So it's not just coming together to learn and discuss, which is good, but one of the things I was thinking about earlier was how quickly things are changing.
Yeah.
And so the ability to be agile and learn together, but then actually take action in an appropriate amount of time.
Yeah, there's something called improvement science. There's a book called The Improvement Guide. Again, encourage you guys to read it. Born out of manufacturing, the way manufacturing works. But there are very much smarter folks than me doing this at a community level. So there's something called Act Cincinnati, Act Cincy, I think, one of those. I don't know. I should include them on my slide. Rob Kahn and Peter Margolis. I encourage you to look at them. They actually are figuring out ways to do these rapid cycle learning for improvement sake. So you can do it that way. It requires you to collect the right data at the right time with the right frequency, to be thoughtful about an immediate plan and figure out how you can rapidly cycle through. They're called PDSAs, Plan, Do, Study, Act stuff. I know a lot of these acronyms you guys are already familiar with, but there is, just to let you know, there's a science to doing it. And so if you guys can make part of your learning community, embrace some of those emerging sciences, I think that would help you in that regard. So I want to, you have another question?
Thank you. So I'll look up Act Cincinnati and include the link in the follow-up email.
Excellent.
So that everybody can see it.
In closing, I just want to thank you all for, allowing me to come here and spill all this stuff out in front of you. It's difficult and it should be emotional because when we start thinking about these, I don't want to be lost. That these are actually, the data were actually taken from young children, right? These are people and we can't lose that. And so I know that the work that you are doing is actually, you guys are on the front line, addressing the impact of all of this stuff. And whereas at one time in a prior life, I was also one of the frontline workers. I used to run a shelter for homeless immigrant kids in Los Angeles. That work was too tough for me. I couldn't do it. I burnt out. It was very, very difficult for me and challenging. So I sit in a comfortable space now, looking at it from a different angle. But I just want to acknowledge that, I truly respect and have great admiration for your ability to do the work that you're doing. So thank you.
So I would like to just give a big shout out to the Richstone Family Resource Center, because this is when a community comes and learns forward, as Efren told us. It took many individuals from different backgrounds, from different places, but all with the same goal and vision to create the healthy community that they want here in this part of Los Angeles. And again, those of you that are online, if you could see what I get to see right now, you would be so impressed. And this would be an example of how communities take complex issues and put them into a fuzzy, warm place like this Family Resource Center. So we're going to have a break, and this is your opportunity to not just stretch, but to please talk with each other, talk with someone that you normally don't know or speak to very at all. And but we'll be back in 15 minutes, and we'll be carrying on with the rest of our learning community. And enjoy your break. If you can hear my voice, clap twice. Oh gosh, you girls and boys do it really fast. You came together. We are ready to begin our next phase of our learning community. And I'm just really thrilled to be able to build upon what Efren has talked to us about some of the practical approaches that are being done in Los Angeles. Okay, so we would ask that you move to the other PowerPoint packet that is available. And I'm really thrilled to introduce Sara Croix. Sara, I got to know during our learning community launch, and we are kindred spirits. I, too, in San Luis Obispo County, direct what we call the San Luis Obispo County Child Abuse Prevention Council. We call ourselves Center for Family Strengthening. And Sara has a much bigger job than me, I think. And I look really forward to learning from her, and I hope you do too, about the actual practical approaches that are being done in your backyard here in Los Angeles, and maybe think about how it applies to your communities that you are that you go to. So, thank you, Sara.
Thank you.
And there's the clicker for you.
Firstly, can everybody hear me okay? Can everyone hear me okay? I can project. Okay. I can sing too, if folks want. I'm just kidding. Hi, good morning still. My name is Sara Croix, and I work with a few different groups. One that I'm here to talk to you about today that I really enjoy working with and have a real honor and pleasure to represent is the Los Angeles County Community Child Abuse Prevention Councils. And the councils are currently supported by Children's Bureau of Southern California. So shout out to Children's Bureau. And I'll give you some, my presentation will definitely be, I think, informative yet not as data heavy. So, kind of switching it up a little bit today, but I will talk about the basic data and evaluation that we do for the councils. And let me just ask quickly for those online and those in the room, how many folks have heard of the Child Abuse Prevention Councils in LA? 3, 4, very nice. Okay, well, I can tell you 5 years ago when I started doing this work, I had never heard of the Child Abuse Prevention Councils. And so I now feel much more informed about them and as I mentioned, excited to work with them. So just to give you a brief overview, the LA County Community Child Abuse Prevention Councils are 12 community-based councils throughout LA County. And I'll talk about what communities those councils are in and a little bit about how they function. The membership of the councils, I should mention, includes volunteer, keyword, volunteer professionals working in the fields of child welfare, education, law enforcement, adult and children's mental health. They can be parents that are part of the councils, community leaders that are part of the councils. It's basically anyone who's concerned about issues of child and family violence. And I know it's all of us here in this room, but it includes those out in the community as well. So the main purpose of the councils are to reduce incidences of child abuse and neglect and to educate the public about child abuse and family violence issues. So the councils are what I would call a primary prevention effort. We're doing work in the community that addresses, for the most part, the entire community as a whole, not just those children who are at risk for being involved with the Department of Children and Family Services or those who are currently involved. So primary prevention efforts. So Children's Bureau was awarded the contract through DCFS, and big shout out to DCFS for making this work possible. Many of the, thank you, Janice. I know you used to oversee the council work before I was a part of it. So, I think it's a small amount of funding, but it allows us to do some work in the prevention sphere in Los Angeles County. So I've been working with the council since 2015, and one of the main things I help to do is coordinate service efforts. I provide some technical assistance to the groups and encourage and facilitate trainings. That is a very small role in comparison to what the councils themselves do. So I should just mention, I get to be here. I have the honor today to be a voice for them, but the truth is these 12 groups are really the ones doing the work every day in the community and often have multiple roles, which we'll talk about. So our grant is $100,000 per year. And if you can kind of think about the math, that pays for myself and for the councils to have funding for their special projects. For those who, work in the funding realm or help to implement programs, that goes very, very quickly. So that's a general kind of overview about the group. So let me talk to you a little bit about who our councils, who are they? So there are 8 geographically based councils throughout LA County, and there are 4 county-wide population-specific councils. So as you'll see here, we have the East Side Child Abuse Prevention Council, which is covering the El Monte area, SPA 3. We have End Abuse Long Beach, that's located in SPA 8, Long Beach. Foothill Child Abuse and Domestic Violence Prevention Council, which is serving also the SPA 3 area. For those who know the SPAs, service planning areas, they are very large. SPA 3 is huge. So we actually have 3 different councils serving that area. We have the Council for Child Abuse Prevention serving the San Fernando and Santa Clarita Valley, so SPA 2 area. San Gabriel Valley Child Abuse Prevention Council, so that's the 3rd group in SPA 3. The SPA 7 Child Abuse Council, and Affirm, which is the new name for the Antelope Valley Child Abuse Prevention Council up there. And lastly, the West Side Anti-Violence Authority, which just rebranded about a year or 2 ago, is now called WAVA for short. So those are your geographies in general. That doesn't mean that every SPA or geography in Los Angeles is covered. There is technically no SPA 4 council. So that would be Metro Central LA. We don't have a council currently in that area. We'd like to. We're kind of challenged with funding to support another group. And I'll talk a little bit about now the county-wide councils. So these are serving particular populations that are needing more representation, more support, and need to be highlighted in LA County even more. So we have the Advocacy Council for Abused and Deaf Children, the Asian and Pacific Islander Children, Youth, and Family Council, the Los Angeles County Family Children Community Advisory Council, or the African American Council, and the LGBT Child Abuse Prevention Council. Those are our current councils. In the past, there was a Native American council, and I would also love for there to be a Latino council, which we currently do not have, but have talked about and have a desire for, again, with some funding increases. So just a few interesting facts. Some of the councils have been around since the early and mid 70s. And they did this before there was funding available. These groups convened with volunteers in their communities with no resources because they felt there was a need and it was important to do so. The Long Beach, End Abuse Long Beach was formerly called the Long Beach Area Child Trauma Council. They were founded in 1975. And they were the first such council in California and the second in the United States. They have a very long history and are a very robust council. They spearheaded the creation of the California Consortium of Child Abuse Councils and have a strong reputation and leading voice, I would say, in the councils as a whole and also in their area. So the second council I'll highlight, just some interesting facts, is the African American Council, which started with the Department of Children and Family Services, and the council and DCFS established the Central Los Angeles Sexual Abuse Unit in 1983. And that was in response to the disproportionate number of African American children that were being sexually abused in LA County. So that's kind of the premise of how their council formed. Okay, so the councils work on a number of joint projects. Some of these projects we do together as a whole, and some of them are really focused on the needs of their particular community and geography. So the Blue Ribbon Campaign is one of our big events or big activities, which recognizes April as Child Abuse Prevention and Awareness Month. So a lot of the activities of the council are happening in April and in the spring. We do publish a Children's Advocate newsletter. It happens twice a year, and I'll give you guys our website address and for those online as well, and you can sign up to receive our newsletter. We won't bombard you. It's twice a year, and you'll receive information about what the councils are doing and what's coming up, so you can sign up through our website. We are currently in this project we do all together, the report card insert project. So I can't tell you exactly how many years ago, but a good number, 20 plus years ago, the group saw an increase in referrals through the DCFS hotline when children were receiving their report cards. So they would bring home a report card that a parent or caregiver deemed as not being satisfactory, and incidences of child abuse went up. And so the report card insert project is in its, I believe, 20th year this year, and it's a response to that issue. So what we do is we have tips for talking to your kids around report card time in 9 different languages. And these easy tips go out throughout the county through school districts. And the hope is that parents are able to read and access that information before they're talking to their child about their report card. So we're gearing up for that right now because the first report cards for LAUSD come out mid-December. So a lot of the work that the groups do, because they have very limited funding, kind of see the most bang for their buck happening by doing trainings for their communities. That could be service providers, grandparents raising grandchildren. It's up to them to decide who they'd like to focus those resources on in their community. So there's a lot of training and technical assistance to the community from the councils happening related to child abuse, family violence issues. One of the focuses I have is to convene the chairs. So each council has a chair or a co-chair, and I convene them roughly once a month. And we talk about our overarching goals, what everybody is doing. We support each other. I would say it's a small learning community of sorts, right? Around this particular issue and topic. So the special projects, this is where the councils focus their resources and activities. So here are a few, just a couple. I mean, really every year the groups are doing 12 plus projects throughout LA County. These are just a few that have been done in the past. Mandated reporter trainings to the community, caregiver workshops, as I mentioned, grandparents raising grandchildren, monthly trainings to service providers. Often the councils that are a bit more established can provide CEUs for their service providers on topics like DV and family law, understanding human trafficking. Some of the other topics that I think are really interesting is understanding and combating institutional racism and child welfare, transformational leadership development of adolescents and young adults, and cultural awareness in association with child protective services. So this is just a taste of what the groups do. I will tell you, the funding, thankfully, from DCFS is very flexible. It does have to hit a few particular goals, but it allows for each group to be able to really think about what's happening in their community and what do they feel like they need to respond to. So we do sometimes get into a little bit of secondary prevention, even though we are, for the most part, focused on primary prevention work. So as you see on the top, the groups this year have $3,500 each to spend on their projects. And as I said, most implement in April. So I know that, as Lisa mentioned, she also has a Child Abuse Prevention Council in San Luis Obispo. And the councils in LA, I would say, are structured differently and look a little bit differently than other councils. So of the 12, some groups that are longer established have a nonprofit status. They are their own 501c3s. They can do fundraising. They, have boards and write reports, and some of them function very much as an agency might for their community or population. Others are fiscally supported by a nonprofit in their area and are much more of an informal group. So they're not necessarily doing as much fundraising, but they are responding to the needs of the community very immediately, as all the groups I feel like really do But I would say that we're kind of a mix of those two structures. So whereas San Luis Obispo, as I understand, is its Child Abuse Council is its own agency, that some of these councils really have maybe 5 members, 10 members, and are newer and looking to grow their membership and grow their work. So it really varies, and I appreciate that our structures can be so flexible, given the funding and the work that we have. So I just wanted to touch on this briefly. For those in LA County, we work with sort of an arm of the Department of Children and Family Services called ICANN, which let me remember, the Interagency Council on Child Abuse and Neglect. So just to share, a large part of my role is to attend a variety of the ICANN meetings that happen countywide, that happen in the county, responding countywide throughout the month. So I do attend the ICANN Child Death Review Team meetings, the ICANN Child and Adolescent Suicide Review Team meetings, which are held at the Department of the Coroner. I do the ICANN data meetings, the operations meeting, and present about the council work at the annual policy meeting. These all can be, as you imagine, very heavy meetings covering very intense cases and topics. But I'd like to point out that the real purpose of why we do these case reviews is to learn from these tragic losses, right? There's always something to be learned in a child's death or a young person who takes their life. And so it's a multidisciplinary team of people reviewing cases for the purpose of finding recommendations and prevention angles. And so I'll cross-share that with the child abuse councils and the works that our groups do. So some may decide if they had, for example, Antelope Valley has had a number of child deaths in their area recently. And those cases we won't review immediately. They'll happen a bit down the road in terms of the ICANN group. So that group is thinking about the firm council, how do we really respond to this increase in child deaths in our community? And so that data can be very helpful, and some of there are confidential reviews, so we can only share, very minimal things, but how that child might have passed, what the situation was, some of that can be shared. So the councils also are a part of the annual ICANN Nexus conference and have done that for several years now. And for those who might not be familiar, it's a conference put on every year by ICANN where you get to learn a variety of topics every year. Mostly, I would say their service providers, DCFS, is present at the conference, but another opportunity to learn and connect for all of you. So just really quickly, Children's Bureau, as the supporter of this contract, has a few outcome measures we really look at. One of the big things we try to do is establish a forum for interagency cooperation and information sharing, right? So I become sort of a spokesperson to our groups back and forth about some of the things I learn, some of the things they learn, and so that's a big part of the role. We do trainings to increase the knowledge of child welfare professionals and community participants on preventing, identifying, and addressing family violence issues. So we, as an agency, will support the council chairs and members through 1 to 2 trainings each year based on a topic they really feel like they want to learn more about. So our last training that we had was on epigenetics and sort of the impact and the relationship with child abuse and family trauma. So that was a really interesting training, and it took us a while to find a sort of presenter and specialist on that topic, but we were eventually able to do it. So I know Efren talked a lot about data and evaluation, and we are by no means at that sort of deep level, right? But each of the councils does have a way that they look to evaluate their activities throughout the year. We do contribute, as I mentioned, I present at the ICANN annual policy meeting. So we are contributing each year to the ICANN State of Child Abuse Report for LA County. I put that website up here for some of you who may do grant writing or may be interested in some of the data. It's being pulled from county departments. It's really fascinating, and we are just a very small contributor to that report. But they have them all online for free, so they're quite quite big reports. But our data collection really includes things like who are the families, children, and total adults that we serve in the community with our efforts each year. How many of our primary prevention materials did we distribute throughout LA County? I can tell you based on the numbers of last year, we distributed about 66,000 prevention materials through the groups, the agencies they work with, DCFS, and other partners. So one thing, if you are in LA County or you'd like to come and pick up some of our primary prevention materials, they are free, and we house them at McLaren Children's Center. So I'll give you my email at the end of this, and you're welcome to email me, and I can connect you to come and pick up free materials. You can distribute to your families, to anywhere in the community, at the dry cleaners. Remember, it's primary prevention, so it can go out and help anyone. So we also look at, we piloted in 2016-17 as a group, looking at 4 what we call universal survey questions. So what we saw is that each of the 12 councils were collecting something about their events and activities, which is great. However, the surveys were all very different, and it was really hard to get a feel for, as a group, as a whole, how we were doing on a few measures. So we, as a group, developed 4 questions that we implemented into each group's surveys, right? I hope that makes sense. And so each year we're pulling that data from each of the 12 groups to collect 4 data sets and points for LA County. So it's been going well. It's a work in progress, especially with 12 different groups. We have turnover at times in terms of the chairs and members. So a big part of my role is educating and working with the new folks as they come on to get them up to speed with what the existing group has been doing. We do collect demographics as a request from DCFS, as well as qualitative data from each group. There are areas for growth. What went well this year? What are some opportunities for next year? How can we continue to do better? And all of the groups are asked to construct their projects with the protective factors strongly in mind. So that is also happening each year, and they evaluate themselves on how well they think they did in applying those protective factors. And as I mentioned, CEUs are provided by some of the councils who have more of an established structure to support CEUs. And in-kind contributions is a new sort of set we started looking at this year. Because I think what we don't realize is, although the funding is $100,000 a year, every council reaches out to agencies, community. There's so much that each community does to, in essence, give back to their group. So without even looking directly at my report, I think we had $40,000 of in-kind contributions, and those were just the groups who actually reported it. I imagine there was much more. So some of the challenges working with 12 volunteer child abuse councils and groups, and some of the challenges that the groups experience, is because the members are volunteers as well as the chairperson. They might have another job. All of us have personal responsibilities and are pulled in many directions. So this can limit their ability to be a really active participant, even though they might want to. Several of the councils have lost members for a variety of reasons and are thus in the process of trying to rebuild their membership and re-strengthen their group. So that's something that we are constantly always working on, is rebuilding groups that lose members, recruiting, retention. It's a constant feedback loop. And of course, annual funding is limited. Some councils are the $3,500 that they get through the DCFS grant, and others are raising funds and have a lot more resources. So, there's just some natural disparities between the groups that are newer and those that have been around longer. How am I doing on time? 5 minutes, okay. Okay, I'm at the end. So, can be verbose, so I want to make sure I'm keeping time for all of you today. So I thought I'd open it up here for some questions, some suggestions that I have and ideas, and also an ask that I'll put out to all of you. So the SoCal learning community that's here today online and in the room, I invite you to look at our website, think about joining a council in your area, or your population of interest. Attend a spring Child Abuse Awareness Month training or event. For a lot of folks, that's a really easy entryway into learning more about what that council does and the work of the group. Tell a friend or colleague about the work of the Los Angeles County Community Child Abuse Prevention Councils. In essence, a big part of my role is being the sort of creating visibility for the councils and the group. We don't have, you know, a big marketing campaign happening or anything like that. So me speaking and sharing with all of you is a big part of. So please spread the word about the councils and to friends, family, and colleagues who might be interested in being a part of it. This is really hard to see, at least here, but you can visit our website, subscribe to our biannual newsletter, which is lachildabusecouncils.org. And if you want, as I mentioned, primary prevention materials in multiple languages, you can get those through me at our storage unit with McLaren in El Monte. You're not going to be able to read my email here at least, but it's my name, Sara, S-A-R-A, Lacroix, L-A-C-R-O-I-X, at all4kids.org. So that's my piece, and I'll open it up for any questions or thoughts from the group. Sarah, there's no H on it. No H. Thank you. I know I threw a lot of information at you all. And you had a lot this morning, so. Sure, of course.
So the purpose, here, I'll come over here.
Yeah.
So the reason why we asked Sara to be part of this day is to introduce to Los Angeles, as well as to everybody in our online audience, about the Child Abuse Prevention Councils and how they function uniquely in every county, and how you see yourself attaching to them in some way to take advantage of their advocacy, of their prevention work, which is really the primary level of prevention we want to highlight today, and the importance. For example, the report card project, is that what you call it? Yeah. I remember reading about that years ago and being so influenced at that time about what they discovered and how, as a group of councils, they did a very proactive approach to educating families how to deal with these kind of matters. And so to know that child abuse incidences go up that time of the year is a data set to know about and to understand and
to respond to.
And respond to. Yeah. And it wasn't something I was thinking about at the time, and it was through this relationship that I started thinking differently too about our prevention work. So this is what we ask of you, is to be connected, not just through this presentation today, but also how you would like to serve on a council. I heard that.
Sure,
or you would be part of that in the future. So yeah, I'm going to check in with our online audience to see if we have any feedback, input. I really appreciate learning about the diversity of the Los Angeles approach to having child abuse prevention councils, and you did it in a very compelling and exciting way. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So what I would like to do is take this moment. Okay, thank you. Is an opportunity to sort of do an activity together before we leave. So to practice what we learned today, reflecting on what Efren taught us, reflecting on your own community, and how you will be carrying back some of this information. Before we go to that activity, I want to remind everybody this is number 1 of a 4-part series. And what we know is that what we did last year, it took all year for us to get to the 4th learning community. And I remember networking with the folks that I did, and I was hearing about their epiphanies. And the epiphanies didn't happen until the 4th learning community. So I want to invite you to stick with us, to be part of this conversation, because what we're learning takes a while to process, marinate in our thinking, and also carry back into our conversations with our colleagues and our folks that support us back in our communities. So we're going to take 15 minutes. We have in your packet the activity chart. And I ask that you take this time to reflect, do it with a partner if you wish, to think about your prevention resources in your community and to take a time to just write it down. Now you might say, I don't know it, but I believe you do know more than you think. And think about your colleagues and partners and other resources that are doing prevention work. Also in your worksheet is a framework. So if you pull out your framework, it gives you some definitions of primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention. This is an exercise we're kind of going to do it very quickly, but I want to introduce it to you so you can take it back to where you are working and thinking about not so much your organization, but your partnerships with your colleagues in the field of doing this prevention work. So for example, you just heard about the Child Abuse Prevention Councils. You know about the different SPAs, as they call them. They're doing primary prevention, which is on the sheet, we'll call that, the level 1 of primary prevention. Are you aware of it? How do you promote that internally in your organization? How can you support promoting it outside of your organization? So we've got really just about 13 minutes, if you can just spend that time, and then we're going to come back and share that. And folks online, I ask that you do the same exercise as well and use this time to talk and map it out. Here you go.
For our online participants, you can find the Southern California Prevention Matrix in the Materials tab in your Go-To Training Control panel. So please open that up and get, or if you have any questions, please enter them into the chat box.
Everybody else gets to wear a lapel microphone, and I always forget my handheld microphone. So for the benefit of, whoops, the group, I hit the wrong button, Natalie. I think I might get it. Oh, here. There you go. So we want to ask the audience online, you know, what inspires you about what you learned today, and let that resonate. I'm not asking for you to report that out right now so much, but to think about that and how you carry that back in your work. The other one is, what can I do within my organization to carry this forward? So with that, we're going to wrap this up, and I really want to thank everybody for staying with us for today and being part of this learning community, and those that have come back from last year as we build our core of learning community folks. I want to remind you that on December 5th, we're coming together in San Diego, where we're going to continue our theme of implementing effective evidence-informed practices in child abuse prevention programs. We want to learn from each other. And we're going to be part of the California Evidence-Based Clearinghouse and have them reintroduce themselves. Some of us know them. Some of us know the website. But again, we're going to really talk to a real live person representing the work there. And there will be a panel discussion of what's occurring in San Diego, because they are too, like the Richstone Family Resource Center and all the organizations we're here represented today, are all doing like work. What can we learn from them? So before we part ways, I'd like to just hear any kind of aha moments or report outs from the Los Angeles group here. I'm looking at anybody that's willing to step forward and share with us what they talked about during their learning exercise. I might pick on Jolie. Here, Jolie.
Okay. So you're talking about the exercise we just did? So the exercise we just did, we were basically, it was more of a discussion. We didn't write too much down, but we're just talking about some of the services we're in spot 8, service plan area 8. And we were just starting to talk about that and what they offer, and looking at starting to really think about when you refer someone. I was noticing that I hadn't really thought about primary, secondary, and tertiary, but thinking about it am I on? Oh, sorry. Thinking about it in terms of referring clients, families, children to services, and how you would look at the strategies on how you're going to make the referral. I don't know if that makes sense. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Yeah? Okay. Oh, thank you.
What Jolie just shared with us from the Los Angeles group here, what they've discovered by doing the exercise. Anybody? Okay. Anybody online would like to call out? Okay, all right. Jessica, I'm just curious. You came here first today, or Janice, I'm sorry. You came here first today. What during this exercise are you coming away with today?
Well, I have to tell you, I'm really overwhelmed with all of the data, and I'm trying to think of it in ways of how to, for the data that exists, how to inspire the agencies that I work with to kind of look at it in a different way as opposed to the standard data that we are always exposed to.
That is huge. Shifting from just the standard way that we're supposed to or we're expected to do because we have to report to a contract or a funder, and being very rote about it. And this was the intention of today, to expand that thinking beyond that process. And so how you're going to carry it back, that's going to be part of, one day it's going to just appear in your head, and it'll become clear for you. And I appreciate being honest and authentic about being overwhelmed, because exactly what you have to do sometimes to evolve and grow and expand your thinking. Anybody from the other counties would like to report out on what they're doing? Still waiting? Okay. So as we wait, I'm just checking in with everybody to confirm that we all know that we have. Here, you got it. You got it?
So Ventura County wanted to know, will the December conversation include discussion of the development of the Federal Clearinghouse for FFPSA? I'm not sure what those letters stand for, but.
So if they were, okay, it's Families First Preservation Act,
Yes.
and I want to check in with the group. That's what they mean? Okay, so Family First Preservation Act. Who knows what that is? Raise your hand. Oh, well, if you, okay, so guess what? We will definitely take that suggestion and integrate that into the conversation, because that, I hate to say it, but there's money tied to it, but a lot. Oh, so you do know a lot about it. I'm going to give it to you.
Please talk about it for us.
Well, the Family First Prevention Act was pushed at a federal level to try to get kids reunited with families, which a lot of people certainly believe that's a good thing. There was a lot of pushback because it will limit a lot of funding on the county level, especially here in Los Angeles County in particular, because of the 4E waiver expiring. And so what is that going to do for the amount of resources that are going to be available to support children impacted by foster care is going to be a big deal, as well as the kind of a domino effect that it'll have on a lot of agencies that depend on a lot of those waiver dollars to provide the services that they have. So now is the question about what work is being done at the state level in terms of how it's going to be rolled out across the state of California. And then of course each county is going to have their own particular process. And so it's certainly incumbent upon all of us to try to make sure that we're part of those conversations. We stay smart on what talks are being had around how the act will be implemented at a local level, because again, it will have an impact on how we are resourced for future years. And this is going to be a big deal. And I think I just saw something in the news just yesterday saying that there are major Southern California counties that will feel this impact a lot sharper than others. And so that's something for us to definitely be mindful of.
Thank you very much. And can you tell the audience who you are?
Name is Thomas Lee. I'm the executive director for Friends LA. Friends LA, not to take any advantages here. We are new to the Los Angeles area. We actually launched about 1.5 years ago. We're part of a national organization called Friends of the Children. Friends of the Children is basically a mentoring program on steroids. And when I say that, our work here in LA is focusing on the child welfare system, but what we do is we connect children starting at the ages of 4 through 6. That's the moment of entry. And we give them a full-time professional salaried mentor that works with them 4 hours a week, 2 hours in a classroom, 2 hours in the home, every single week from kindergarten all the way to high school graduation. So it's a 12+ year commitment to children to make sure that we end the cyclical nature of foster care as well as generational poverty, and really try to change some of those terrible numbers that we had the experience of looking at earlier.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you very much. It's I got to know about this program recently, and I through Jory, who's one of our visitors here today, and it's a very exciting concept and model for all of us to be more aware of, and including in our prevention matrices as a key partner. So I hope the question was answered from the Ventura group about that particular funding or mandate, I guess that's what it is, that's going to shift sort of the paradigm of how the work is done. But at the same time, we're all in it together, and we all have to make that time to understand that better. So we'll definitely make that part of what we do on December 5th. And Save the date. This is the groups that will be part of this. As you can see, we have this rich resource of connections from all of our regions of Southern California. So we go beyond your county borders, and this is what the learning community was designed to do. And we want to just give a little shout out to our own data that when we survey you, and by the way, you have in your packet an evaluation form, and we ask you online, we ask you at the remote sites as well as today to please give us some feedback. And this is an example of what people told us last year. So whatever you tell us helps us respond to the need of learning and making it relevant to you. And yep. And here it is. Strategies 2.0 is here to convene us in a way to be with our cross learning. And also, please, I know sometimes we say, oh, we're going to register for the learning community, and then they don't. When you don't, that's okay. But we really need your contact information. We need to know that you're out there. And we need to know that so we can also go back and build our resources that suit your needs. And thank you. Thank you for taking time and being with us. And please eat more food. And Lita, do you?
I'd just also like to talk about the excellent work you did on your series last year, and to remind everybody that Strategies 2.0 has a YouTube channel where they can go back and see your whole series from last year as well.
Thank you for reminding me about the resource on the website and the YouTube videos, and you get the condensed version, and you don't have to drive anywhere to see it, so it's really cool.
Hi everyone, this is Natalie. Thank you, Lita. And I'll piggyback on what you said to say that today's convening is being recorded and will also be uploaded onto the YouTube channel. On your evaluations in the upper right-hand corner, there's a section for County of Employment. I just wanted to call that out, that please put down your County of Employment, because that's how, for our data purposes, we can track our regional representation. And then you can expect a follow-up email that I'll be sending out most likely next week with all of the slide decks from today, all the resources we talked about. I made some notes, and feel free to email me if there's something else that you think of that you would like me to share via email. And I'll send you all an email with my contact information. But just for today, it's Natalie, Natalie, at Natalie, last name Rhodes, RHODES.com. And thank you everybody so much for your participation.
Do those evaluations and you're free to go.